You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey all, you're listening to Cards to the Moon. I'm Clark, and with me is just Hyung. No need to worry though, we didn't make a personal change in 2022 by kicking John out of the podcast. He's just not feeling 100%, but hopefully we'll have him join us again in our next episode. Speaking of episode, this won't be one of our regular full-length shows. If you missed our latest episode on Tuesday, that wasn't our regular episode either because we ran into technical audio issues. So we ended up just airing a short segment of what we recorded last week, which was one of our 2022 hobby predictions that Fanatics was going to buy out Topps. Now, I don't think any of us thought it would happen so quickly, but our general consensus in that episode was that it was a question of when and not if. So you can go back and listen to the 5-minute episode on Tuesday, if you haven't already, to hear what we thought might happen in more detail. And as promised in that episode, because we couldn't salvage the entire episode, we transcribed the rest of that segment on our 2022 hobby predictions for you to read, which is now up on 5cardguys.com. We'll have a link for you in the show notes right below wherever you listen to your podcast. We also wanted to give you guys one extra episode this week where Hyung and I can just do a quick follow-up to the massive news of Fanatics acquiring Topps. So Hyung, what was your initial response when you heard the news earlier this week?
Already.
Yeah.
That was my initial response. But
exactly.
The next response was, man, Topps just went from 1.3 billion to 500 million, just like that. Right?
Yeah,
and Fanatics is playing chess out here. For me, it was inevitable. We talked about it on the show. It was a matter of when, and it makes sense if you think about it because the Fanatics deal was supposed to start in 2026 with the licensing, but then it allows Fanatics to immediately make an impact right now and get into the cards. But more excitingly, as a lot of people would agree, is that basketball and football licensing is key because that means a chance to bring back Topps Chrome onto that side of things, that side of the world. And I think a lot of people are excited about that, including myself and a lot of others. So I think overall it's great news because we all love the Topps brand. We all grew up in the Topps brand, and it's something that's very nostalgic to a lot of us. And some of the biggest cards in iconic cards in history are of the Topps Bowman brand. So, being able to continue that, I think it was a great move by Fanatics. I think it was a great move by Topps as well. Like I said in last week's episode, it's just a matter of time. It's it's a win-win situation for both, and hopefully it will create change in the hobby for the better and move us into a better position moving forward.
Yeah, totally agree. And one of the first things I thought about too was that Topps products were here to stay, the Bowman Chrome, the Topps Chrome, the sets we love and got us back into the hobby. So really glad to hear that the Topps products are here to stay for longer. And I also like this awesome diagram that Josh Luber had on his Instagram account, where it was essentially a timeline with the left marker being 1952, and then in the middle is today, and then an arrow pointing towards the future. And below that timeline is the Topps logo running across the entire timeline. Of course, meaning Topps, the brand, is here to stay. So yeah, that was totally cool. I want to ask you, what do you think of the reported $500 million plus to acquire Topps? Was it an overpay, just right? Or, and just remember, like you mentioned, Topps in its heyday was valued at over $1 billion.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly it. I think it's a steal in any market, it reminds me of Luca's cards, right? 1.3 billion to 500 million. Yeah. I think Fanatics got a great deal, and I think Topps got a great deal. Fanatics played their cards right, where, they were able to get a really good deal on Topps, and now they can expand in their ways and their strengths and with their resources. So I think it was in the long in the big picture, Fanatics got a great deal.
It's a lot of money, but yeah, just the timing was perfect, right? So
absolutely.
John isn't here today, but he did leave a couple of good notes for us to go over. And one of them was whether we thought Fanatics bought out Topps this early in the process to protect the hobby. And I think what he meant by that was, if they had just waited for the MLB license to switch over from Topps to Fanatics in 5 years or so, there was some concern that Topps would just print the heck out of their cards to cash out as much as possible. Of course, that would damage the hobby if the supply far outweighed the demand, leading to another potential junk wax era. So what do you think about that kind of scenario, that kind of theory?
I think it can happen, but I think it is good that Fanatics did it earlier, because I do feel like the market in general had great momentum, and I still believe that the people in place do believe that the market is on a long bullish run. So I think it helps with the momentum for them to do it sooner than later. Obviously, a lot of people had questions. Would Topps kind of overprint at that point where they knew their fate was going down? But that also, also cripples them, I guess, in terms of like their valuation, right? So that's going to come into play in the long term. So I think whatever value you have, Topps, you got to put it into this right now. Take the 500 mil because you don't have too much leverage, I guess. So I think, I don't think it would affect it, but I do see a scenario like that. It could unfold, but I wouldn't say that it would happen.
Yeah. You know what? I was thinking the exact same thing. Like if Topps had overprinted and just waited the 5 years, it would just devalue them so much,
Right.
Like people would have seen that the cards aren't, worth that much because they're printing so many. So I guess we don't have to worry about that now because the deal is done, right? So Fanatics owns Topps now. But I'm going to ask this next question this way. Over under 1 year that Fanatics buys out Panini.
This is, I guess that's the question that everybody asks: who's next, right? Like who's next on the list? But I personally don't think Panini has that much value in them to buy out. Personally, I don't think Fanatics needs to at this point. If it was a scenario like Upper Deck, I really like that, but I don't think Upper Deck would sell. But I personally don't think Panini would basically be a good buy at this point.
Yeah, they really just have the basketball license, which they're about to lose anyways, right?
Right.
So I guess it's just a matter of whether they want to expedite that process like they did with Topps.
And they right now they only have the niche markets like UFC and other smaller, I think WWE. Right. I could be wrong about that, but that's going to be tough for Panini. Right now they're in a tough position, and I don't know what's going to be the fate of Panini. But it'll be definitely interesting to see. But I'm going to say over to answer your question. I don't think I don't think Fanatics buys Panini. That's my take.
Yeah. That'd be the safe bet, I think. But if someone said over under 1 year that Fanatics buys out Topps, I would have said over as well.
Oh, really?
so it should have been over and under 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it basically was. From basically acquiring licensing from NFL and NBA. I don't even remember what that was. Our podcast hasn't been a year, so it's less than a year that all this has happened, right? Think $800 million that Topps left on the table, basically from losing that contract in the span of 6-7 months, which is incredible. Yeah,
it's a good point. That just goes to show you how quick things move in the hobby, right? Absolutely. On the business standpoint, investor standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we asked this question before when Fanatics worked out a deal with the MLB and NBA licenses, but now that Fanatics is outright acquiring their competitors like Topps, and then we also talked about potential acquisition of Panini whenever that might happen, are you concerned of a monopoly? Again, that question of a monopoly.
I'm always concerned about monopolies, and everybody should as well. But I also believe that Fanatics is going to make the industry better. So I'm very optimistic about that. But I also believe as technology increases, as the potential of what we talked about with with the crypto and digital world, I think there's going to be new companies that evolve from all of this. And as the hobby evolves and changes, bigger companies are going to provide the solutions to the problems that this industry needs. And you're going to see a company that doesn't exist today, exists tomorrow, and become kind of like that competitor to Fanatics. I'm hoping, because that's exactly what really needs to happen to make this market as stable, secure, and I guess bullish in the
Right.
whole, right? So
I was thinking about what we said when Fanatics did get those two huge licenses, and we asked this question about Monopoly. And I think back then we said we just trusted the people that are in place, like Josh Luber heading this new division within Fanatics, that he cares for the hobby. So that's like good news on that front. But in business, you never know. Like, he might be in, and the next year he's out for whatever
right.
reason, and then we're worried about who's taking over and what are their intentions for the
For sure.
company, right?
And that's the difference, though. Josh Luber did take action and do it, right? And I think that's what is needed in this industry, is innovative leaders who can see the parallels of other markets and apply the same business principles into those markets. And that's what successful entrepreneurs do, and they see that opportunity and vision to be able to do that, right? So I believe if it's not Josh Luber, it's going to be somebody else. And if they fail, it's going to be someone else that's going to have the answers to kind of like the problems or whatever they feel that they could bring value into kind of like this industry, right? So that's why I say a lot of people don't like change or evolvement of things, but I think it's inevitable, and it's necessary for us to go through these changes, because in the end we're going to look back and say, remember that time the hobby was so unstable, there's so many gray areas, there's so many discrepancies on grading companies and whatever it may be, right? So I think there's a lot of non-regulated things that go on the hobby, and I think some of these things are for the better. And if it's, like I said, if it's not Josh Luber, it's going to be another entrepreneur that sees the same vision or same opportunity or same problems that they're able to kind of solve.
Yeah, no, I certainly hope so, for sure. It was interesting you mentioned in the answer to the last question that we could potentially see smaller companies that might not exist right now, but they might exist tomorrow, that could really add value to the hobby, or even compete against Fanatics and make the hobby as a whole even better. I was going to ask, like, can you think of any current big companies that could be that competitor to avoid that monopoly? And the only thing I could think of was Amazon, just because they have the cash to acquire those licenses when those deals are up. And if you forget already, they acquired Whole Foods, something that's not in their industry, and it should be a lesson for a lot of us that these big companies are always looking to grow bigger and not just stay within their sectors, right? So
absolutely.
I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
I mean, it could definitely happen, and that's where most of these big corporations go, is where the money follows, right? So I could see that happening. In what extent? I'm sure the hobbyists are going to be thrilled about that one if that ever happens. But that's just the nature of kind of our I guess our controlled capitalism that we live in, right? It's there are rules of the game. People understand the rules well, and if you can put it in a way that you could capitalize on it, and I think any company that has the ability and has the resources that can do it may step in your perspective that you're mentioning, right? So, but I truly believe in the smaller companies that create, and they actually are a part of the industry, and they want to make the industry better by providing services that that get the industry better, right? I support those companies instead of a big tech company coming in, and hopefully we could back up those companies, because we all have to question the monopoly as well. It keeps a good balance, and keeps them on their toes of that they have to do what's right as well. So I think it's going to be a balance, and you're going to see a lot more companies pop up, right? And that's the exciting part of the industry is, it's not 2018. Of course, we all want to go back to 2018. We'd have all spent a lot more money buying cards, right?
Yeah.
But as you kind of go through those experiences, you live and you learn, right? And you want to grow. So,
yeah, well said. Well, we're only not even a week in 2022, and we had this huge hobby news. Do you think there's going to be bigger news than this for the rest of the year, for the rest of the 51 weeks remaining?
You know what? This was pretty big news, and I guess this was one of the predictions we made in 2022. Yeah. So it did come true within like a week. But right. It's for sure you're gonna hear. 6 months ago, the NFL and NBA licensing deal was huge news, right? Yeah. And then in the same year, you have basically Topps being actually bought out, right? And
true.
Like I said, I think fractional shares are going to be a big thing in 2022. And as technology increases and people create apps and other solutions to people wanting to invest in, and it makes it an easier way, I think stuff like that will definitely grow, and you'll see a lot of movement kind of from other, I guess, sectors and industries bleeding into kind of like the card industry. So it's going to definitely be excited to see what happens, but no one knows, right? It's every week is a surprising week. There's a record-breaking sale every week. It's just nuts to see kind of where this hobby went in this crazy world, right? In the last 2-3 years.
Crazy, yeah.
But on the good side of things, it's like I'm sure every hobbyist can agree. It's like this is a great escape from kind of like. Mm-hmm. It's not saying that this is not part of the real world, but like we're going through a lot of stuff, and to be able to have something that people actually love to do, for the most part, from a hobby perspective and from an investment perspective, being able to use this industry to help you in life in general. Like for me, I know the card industry kind of helped me pivot my businesses during these times. So it is definitely crazy, but it definitely is a beautiful thing in my opinion, what's happening in the card industry.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm in the same boat too. It helped me pivot to doing something I really love, full time. Right. So can't complain. And for me, anything like big news like this is just good for the hobby. Like that just reaffirms my belief and our belief that the hobby is here to stay. People think it's going to crash and burn, but with all this money flowing into the industry, like why would any company like Fanatics or any like all these newer companies, why would they invest so much time and money into something that they don't really believe in?
Right. And that's why it's like you can't live on fear. You can't live on fear. You got to just go with the flow.
100%. So bullish on the hobby. Okay, I think again we think it's great news with the Fanatics and Topps deal announced. We're both excited about the future of the hobby, even more so, and it definitely should be a fun 2022 in the hobby. Like I mentioned, this extra episode is a bit shorter than our regular episode, but we wanted to address this sooner than later. And we'll be back with our regular Tuesday episode, hopefully with John back. And throughout the year, we're looking forward to interviewing more guests who are making waves in the hobby. Thanks again for all our subscribers and followers. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate a 5-star rating and hope you'll share the podcast with your hobby friends. Thanks, guys, and see you in a few days. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.